have a choice to hold the mics in our hands, and just, the only thing we need to remember is to speak into the mic. That's that's good.
Very good.
I think so. Yeah. Let's give it 1 more minute for 8 comments and.
Well, the rent is higher than this.
We'll give it another minute. The camera is over there. I think if you speak together,
Yes, I just, yeah, in the middle, yeah.
it's so probably twice the weight of the. That watch is that clock is a minute past.
Time 1400 instead of 2:00.
I do that because sometimes it's easy, particularly because sometimes I have to schedule meetings with people in.
Yeah, that would be, yeah. It's internationally, that would be,
So it makes it easier. And I don't, I'm used to inches, meter, all that. But also the problem switching from one to another.
makes a lot of sense. Is this on?
That way, yes, they are on. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. As most of you may know, we have this program, the Council Connections, since the time of COVID. So, yeah. Okay, can you hear better now? Yeah. So the Council Connections program started with COVID because people couldn't get together, they couldn't meet, we couldn't have committee meetings and so on. And even after the restrictions were lifted, we decided that that's a good idea. So we are trying to alternate interviewing people that are on the staff, people that are on committees, people that do crazy things, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, that depends. And so today we have Dick Barry, that is called to fame or something like that. We'll talk about that in a minute. In the meantime, I had a couple of questions. So I think it starts on page 175. And no, I mean, it's not. So we will talk about about what he does, what his role is and has been, and then we'll open it for questions. So the best thing is maybe just give us an idea of what you have been doing at Woodland Pond.
Well, this September, I will be a resident here for 12 years. And as you can see, I came here as a mere child, barely out of knickers. And from the day one that I came into this community, I have loved it. And it's always been my happy home. And in the first 5 years prior to my joining the board, I participated fully in the community. I served on many groups, with many groups, including the Decor and Design Committee, the Dining Room Committee, the Health Center Committee. I chaired the Nominating Committee for the Resident Council for 3 years. I did not serve on the Resident Council itself because I was wintering those years in Puerto Rico, which prohibited me from even being a candidate. I joined the Pondeliers and I wrote the Woodland Pond Anthem that you heard in 2022 at their performance. I joined the Play Readers and I wrote plays and comedy sketches for that group that were performed over a 3-year period that some of the longer residents might recall. And I worked for 3 or 4 months with Michelle Gramalia. We co-authored the Resident Guide to Assisted Living. That was a very unique experience and a very wonderful one because it really gave me an up-close view of Michelle's extraordinary talents and qualities. And then I wrote after being here for 2 years, I wrote the book on Woodland Pond, which marketing picked up and used quite extensively with hot resident prospects. Nothing gave me greater joy and pleasure than when new residents to the community sought me out to tell me that reading that book was one of the factors that made them choose Woodland Pond as their home. And all during that time, I also was writing a book a year that I would present to the community during our October annual Kaleidoscope. The One Book, One New Paul's annual event, I chaired the Woodland Pond session for that for several years. And I also volunteered to read to 3 legally blind residents who we started out, I would read the monthly newsletter to them, but then they asked me if I would extend it to read selections from my short story collections that had already been published, which I did. And that was a great pleasure. I also was a very active member of the Saturday mornings men's group until I joined the board and it sort of turned into the complaint department. So I left that. Oh yes, and I was one of the founding members, along with Maddie Lee and Halima Hassan and a few other people, of a charade group, and we had great fun with that, acting silly and dumb and playing charades, and we'd really like to even revive it at some point. But that just about. I think that's a good summary of my years prior to joining the board.
I was going to ask you what you do with your free time, but I guess
Right.
but also professionally, I mean, was there anything in your professional life that you did that also?
Yes, indeed. Well, my career was in the field of education, and as a district-wide administrator, director of education for a large Long Island school district, I was often invited by local community civic groups to join their board, and I did that. I also was living in 2 condominiums, one during the week in the community and one far away from the community on the weekends to get a little respite. And I was president of both of the boards of those condominiums. I also, of course, as a district-wide administrator, worked directly and very actively and continuously with the Board of Education. And from that many years of experience, I really saw how boards can operate very productively and how they can really be soured and be acting counter effectively when you have the wrong combination of people on a board. So that was a
So this was your training to serve on the board
Yes.
of Woodland Pond?
yes, it certainly was. Indeed, it certainly was.
And you know, but then you joined the board. What year did the board of Woodland Pond? The board of Woodland Pond. What year did you join the board?
Well, as soon as Woodland Pond became an independent incorporated entity
Uh-huh.
in 2016, one of the first things the newly independent board did was to change their bylaws to bring in 2 resident directors with full voting rights. And that's when Ray Smith and I were elected to the board. And did you ask me what were my responsibilities from that point on, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, we
Okay,
want to know what you
okay,
do there. I mean, you know,
Okay, okay. Well, we sit around and have coffee and we talk and no,
talking about coffee.
I've served as the board secretary from the day that I was elected to the board, and they keep putting me in that position. So I guess they must be satisfied. I write the monthly board column for the newsletter, as you I hope a few have read. I also
Where is the newsletter?
The Woodland
can
Pond
people in the Woodland Pond?
Yes, right. Yeah, the Woodland Pond newsletter. Thank you, Yakov. I also write a condolence letter to the families of all our residents who have passed on. And I would say to you that in the last 6 years, that's been over 103 residents that I've sent condolence letters to.
That
I-
must be a kind of a hard thing to do.
Well, it is, especially since I always try to personalize the letters based on my information about a particular person, or then asking my fellow residents about their memories of a particular person. For example, I'll give you one example. Rita Haas, who just passed away this past week, a good friend of mine, Katie McIntaggart, was telling me how Rita would, in her great big old Cadillac, she would drive Katie and her sister to Sunday Mass, and then she would drive them down to the Gunk House for brunch. So that was a very fond memory that Katie had about Rita. And it would be things like that you would like to personalize in your condolence letter. But I also serve on the executive committee, the strategic planning committee, the governance committee, and I'm sort of a one-man subcommittee on forming an evaluative instrument for the board, and then getting the responses and tabulating them, and then making a formal report back to the board on the results that were turned in.
Do you think that people at Woodland Pond understand well enough what the board does, or there are misconceptions about?
I think there are a number of misconceptions. As I said, I was a very active participant in the Men's Saturday Coffee Group until I was elected to the board. And then at that time, I just found that too many people were turning to me as if I were the complaint department. So there has to be an understanding, a very firm understanding, that Michelle Gramaglia is responsible for everything. that takes place on a daily basis within this community. The board, in turn, is responsible for her reporting to us, and we supervise her and we evaluate her and we continue to use her and hire her as our president and CEO and determine her recompense. The only restriction that resident directors have is that we do not evaluate Michelle. That was part of the bylaws when they just felt that that could be too uneasy.
Just you and
Just Ray and I.
Ray and you.
We, even though I'm on the executive committee,
Yeah.
when the executive committee looks at Michelle in any evaluative way, I excuse myself, or
Yeah.
I'm just excused, the door is closed.
Well, I mean, I served on a couple of boards, professional boards,
Yes.
and one of the things that was made clear to us as board members, although I represented, for instance, the New York chapter and the national organization.
Yes,
But
yes.
once we were nominated and accepted, our first responsibility was the national. We were on the board of the national organization. So
Mhm.
we couldn't, as members of the board, we couldn't have our loyalty was to the whole organization, not our chapter.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Yakov, because that was another misconception, that a resident who is elected to the board is really always representing the residents. And that is not the case. The first loyalty of being a board member, and I even have it here, is they call it the duty of loyalty. This is from our bylaws. And you must serve the best interest of the corporation, which is Woodland Pond. You must give the corporation your undivided allegiance. You must respect the sessions of the board for its confidentiality, and you cannot have any conflict of interest so that you can't be doing business with the community at the same time that you're serving on the board. I can give you, let me give you an example. As we know, we received a significant maintenance increase for 2023 of 5%, wasn't it 5%?
Close to 5%.
Close to 5%. To me, it seemed like 5%. Now, if I were just representing myself as a resident and my interests as well as your interests, I would be a stalwart. I would be in stalwart opposition to such a considerable increase. But that's not the case. I mean, I have to look at what is the financial benefit and welfare of Pond Inc., the entire entity of Woodland Pond. And if that serves the basic needs of the corporation, then that has to be my first loyalty in rendering my decisions and casting my vote for approval or abstaining.
So your royalties from the book that you wrote about Woodland Pond, you are not turning them.
No. I have never, I've written 2 books on Woodland Pond, one after my second year and one after the 10th anniversary. Both of those books I've never made a penny on because I've never made a penny on them. That's all I mean, it's very involved financially, but I've never made a penny on either of those.
That's what I imagine.
Either of those books, right. One other misconception. Ray and I appeared before the resident council, maybe, I don't know, several months ago to answer any questions that they had. And someone at that meeting said, Well, isn't it true that you have to be a financial wizard to serve on the board? And I immediately practically stood on my toes and said, oh, no, contrarily, you must have people on the board who are steeped in financial wizardry, but that does not apply to all the board members. We have a wide variety. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have the dean of SUNY New Paltz. We have, but then fortunately, we also have public accountants. So we're well represented in terms of our people with vast financial backgrounds and who can ask very penetrating questions. And as you might have noticed, when I reeled off the number of committees that I served on, the Finance Committee, which is a bona fide board committee, is not one of my bailiwicks. So, and I'm very happy to report that.
So what makes you, your qualifications that makes you particularly effective on the board? What's
Well, okay. I have a personal mantra. I show up, I speak up, I shut up, and then I listen up. I do all my homework diligently. Every month we get big packets of reading material to peruse, and I do that days in advance of the next meeting. And then at the meeting, I'm not a wallflower. I'm very happy to give my opinion as persuasively and cogently as I can present it. And then I shut up. And what I mean by listening up is there are 12 or we're now going to have 13 other members on the board who are really, I have the greatest respect for them, and they often might have a different perspective, a different viewpoint about the issue at hand, so that I want to listen. And there have been times when I've been completely dissuaded from my view, and I really been convinced that their view is correct. So that's what I mean by listening up.
so, but do you feel that they appreciate your work?
Well, I mean, let's see. They continue to ask me to serve as the board
So
secretary.
there must be something there.
And well, and every board president has really given me considerable praise for my work, which I very much appreciate. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, you mentioned before that you served on different boards, and one of the things that makes a board work and not, I mean, it's
Yes.
some characteristics. What would you say are the characteristics of the Woodland Pond board that make it a good board?
Yeah, that make
If it is a good board.
well, it's to me, it's an outstanding board, because no matter who the people are who have left the board and the new members who have come on the board, to me, it's almost miraculous that there has been no cliques, such harmonious representation and respect for one another. We're very mindful of time. Whenever we set 1 hour, an hour and a half, 2 hours for a board meeting, we always try to come in under the time, because Michelle, of course, attends our meetings, and we know that her time is very valuable. But these are people who are really dedicated to the benefit of Woodland Pond, And it's such a pleasure to go there because you know there's not going to be any stress, there's not going to be any tension, because people are going to either perseverate on what they think is the correct answer, or they're going to really argue vociferously with other people on the board. This just never happens. And I think after the due deliberations that take place in our discussions, I cannot think of any one time in the last 6 years when our final vote has not been either unanimous or perhaps with one abstention. But I cannot think when there was one negative vote.
That's a very important thing, because
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I have been on boards that
Yeah.
are humongous.
Yeah.
I mean, the 50 some people. I mean, it's very difficult to get things done. I mean, with that.
Absolutely, it just becomes an obstruction, and
Yeah.
I've sat on too many other boards where that was the case. So I have a special appreciation for the harmoniousness of this board. It's just really, it's the best board I've ever served on, and I look forward to the meetings.
So I hope you are well paid for your services. no?
Yes, well, you know, I keep raising my fee every year, and they keep saying, no, they won't pay it. But the only thing they pay me for is when I run out of a roll of 100 stamps that I send to the families of our past residents. They recompense me for that. No, everyone serves as a volunteer without any pay, no
Of
pay.
course. Of
Well,
course.
we do get coffee,
Huh?
and
And
occasionally,
you get coffee.
yeah, we get coffee.
Wow.
And then at our annual retreat, when we have our annual retreat, I'm responsible. I'm responsible for. It runs from like noontime to about 6 o'clock in the evening, and then we have dinner here, and I'm responsible for arranging with the dining services, the menu. So I always try to go for the best.
I think it's pretty fair. I mean, because people that sometimes don't realize that your time is valuable. I mean, and the other
Well,
boards.
I mean,
people are-
my time is valuable because I spend 3 hours every weekday just devoted to my writing, and that's how I've been able to publish 14 books in
yeah.
Woodland Pond. But I mean, Ray, who was a resident director of a leading New York City bank before it was taken over by Deutsche Bank. You know, we are retired. I mean, for all intents and purposes, and but all the other people, many of the other people, are still functioning in highly demanding professional
Yeah.
roles. So we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being retired, I mean, sometimes my friends ask me, "Oh, I've not seen you for so years. So are you retired?" So I ask them, "Well, your question is, do I get paid?"
Yeah. No.
All right.
No.
And so, giving all all those duties, and say, what do you think may attract people to serve on a board?
What may have attracted the other?
You or other people on the
Well,
board?
I mean, I love Woodland Pond, and any way that I can be of service to Woodland Pond, I'm happy to. I was asked if I would serve as the MC of the little premiere tonight, which again, I'm delighted to do that. As to my fellow board members, they're a very, very interesting group, and for the most part, they have a background of strong civic duty, strong civic responsibility, and they seem to really, really care. Perhaps a number of them are dealing with their own parents, but they really, really do care about us seniors, and they really want the best for Woodland Pond. They know it has a sterling reputation. They're very committed to maintaining that and seeing that it continues to flourish. So I think that's what makes them. After all, we're not ExxonMobil, we're not General Motors, but we do have certainly a wonderful reputation, and that's for people. That's a due reason for their attraction to come on our board. And then we're all such lovely people that they enjoy us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's important. Now, if me or one of our
Yes.
people here wanted to serve on the board, what should we prepare? What should we do?
Well,
If somebody wanted to become a board member, that's
I personally found that as much as I loved Woodland Pond from day one, as much as it became my happy home, as much as I, just plunged into all these activities that I enumerated several minutes ago, that this is a complex society, and it has rules and regulations and norms, and that it took me quite a while to really feel that I had a comprehensive understanding of everything. And my recommendation to anyone aspiring to serve on the board would be to immerse yourself as much as possible in the community by actively serving on committees, by participating in a lot of various activities, and then and being a good listener. Listen to how people feel. I mentioned before that when a resident becomes a board member, his loyalty, as I said, is to the corporation as opposed to his own interests and the interests of his fellow residents. But that doesn't dismiss the notion that as a resident, Ray and I can often offer a unique perspective to other board members about being a resident here. And I'll give you an example of that. One time, very early in my term on the board, we were discussing personnel and turnover and so on. And I pointed out to the other board members that there's a unique interaction and relationship that our residents, including myself, have with all our staff, especially our young staff, because we interact with them, our servers, our maintenance people, and we develop friendships. And because of our age, we think of them as grandchildren, and we think of them as it's just part of the Woodland Pond family. And consequently, we can really be upset by the loss of a particular person whom we've been very fond of and established a long-standing relationship with. And that was to my fellow board members a point to be taken and reckoned with in their consideration. So that's just a small example of how very often board members will turn to Ray or to me and say, well, how do the residents feel about this? How are the residents reacting to this? And that's where we can truly represent a residential perspective without in any way being disloyal to the corporation. So that's a benefit. And remember, many CCRCs will not have residents on the board. And a good number of CCRCs that do have residents on the board, they are not voting members. And fortunately for our enlightened board, as soon as they became independent in the year 2016, the first thing they did was to enfranchise residents as board members and as full voting board members. So that's a big deal, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Definitely, it's a big deal. And the question is, who came up with that idea?
For what?
Who came up with that idea to,
Well, some very enlightened board members. Um, um, and of course, we work very, very closely with Michelle.
Yeah.
And I would have to say, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, we are responsible for supervising and evaluating and continuing Michelle's services, but she runs such an open ship with us that she's constantly in touch with the board, and transparency is her middle name. And therefore, that too contributes to the board's functioning so productively because of our CEO and the close relationship, the open relationship that we have with her. She's just extraordinary. She really is. Is this vodka or water? No, it's water. Oh, that's even better. Tanqueray? Okay, we're in business. Okay.
What do you think about, in terms of how many people on the board get to interact with some of the residents? I know that some of them had relatives that were residents, but
Yes.
do you think that that's something that of value, that we should have them, on occasion come here? And I know for COVID,
Oh.
during COVID, it was difficult.
Well,
But
that's.
I know that at one point there was an attempt to have it.
We've made efforts several times, and sometimes successfully, to schedule meetings with the resident council, because you're the duly elected representatives of all the community, of the entire community, with the board, just for generally get to know one another and a little greater understanding of various functions. But in terms of the community, that's, I would say, a two-edged sword, because we certainly would like the residents to know who the board members are. That's for sure. But there's that old danger of the complaint department that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
If we say, well, let's have a cocktail party and we'll have all the residents with the board, is it going to be one where board members are suddenly going to be put in the position where someone is going to come up to a board member and say, what are you going to do about too much salt in the food in the dining room? So, I mean.
We need to balance. We will have two people, one of them for salt, one of them against salt.
Well, because within 15 minutes, you'd have someone coming up to the same board member saying, what are you going to do about not enough salt in the food in the dining room? So
let's not talk about garlic and onions.
Yeah. But there's always a desire there really is a desire on the part of the board to be more known to the just as individuals to the residents, and how we can achieve that without running into that constant complaint department perspective is a challenge.
We have quite a few people here in the audience. Somebody has questions, or why don't you come here, maybe speak on the mic? I mean, I give you the mic, so.
What's the length of term of office?
Oh, it's endless. I know, it's endless. You're elected for, each term is 3 years. but you can be reelected for 3 consecutive terms. So that's why I'm in my, I've been on the board for 6.5 years, and I have 2.5 more years to go, and then they kick me off, kicking and screaming. And but then I only have to wait 1 more year and I can come back again, but I'm not going to do that. I promise you, I'm not going to do that. But it's 3 consecutive 3-year terms.
Oh,
It's better, okay, that the appeals of government. And
The board is a volunteer board completely?
Yes.
How do you control the numbers? What if 15 people or 20 people want to volunteer?
I think it's specified in our bylaws. I mean, I haven't committed all of our bylaws to memory, but I think it is specified that it should not exceed more than 18. Now, there's another thing about the resident members, that although we're currently 2 and have been historically 2 since the independence of Woodland Pond Board, if we cannot exceed 20% of the board representation. So because we've been, our membership has been around 12 or 13, we haven't reached that magic number where you would bring on a 3rd member from the residents. And the other issue is that because you might reach that number, but then 3 or 4 months later, you might have a board member resigning for personal, family reasons, whatever, then you're in violation of that 3rd, So we've been very conservative with that, but as of this date, we have not reached. If we were at a 16, I would say we'd bring on a 3rd member from the residents.
any other questions? Okay, so I guess you answered every possible question that came up. So I think I'll give you a passing grade.
Well, it's the gin that makes me so. No, I'm very happy to answer questions about my work on the board, and I could just summarize by saying it's been a great joy. It really has. I've just enjoyed these last 6.5 years, and I hope to enjoy the remaining 2.5, and then I will canter off into the sunset.
That one sunset, not. Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming, the questions and the attention, and thanks Rick for the presentation.